whistling call behind us, which may or may not belong to white-browed scrub robin. The francolins have started yelling. The baboons, there's one coming right out. I forgot, John, I can't actually move that camera. Baboons coming out of the trees now. One of them jumped 3 meters onto the ground because it saw Eugene and got a very big fright. Anyway, he's disappeared off into the dawn light, not Eugene, the baboon. And it's all rather pleasant out here now, I must say, very pleasant by our fire. Connor has brought us a kettle. We're making some coffee. So Brent and Jamie are freezing on their own with Viam and Brian. Now, Betty, you had a lovely question about water recycling in the Sabi Sands. Does it happen? Betty, it does to a certain extent, and it doesn't to some extent. So, I mean, the water that we get comes out of the ground, and eventually, yes, it does fetch back up in the ground. Do we have an active recycling program? In all honesty, we don't. But because we live in a camp that's relatively small, and we don't have baths and that sort of thing, we've got showers that are normally cold, and so we don't use a lot of water when we're having a shower. They're not normally cold at all. The water does filter back into the ground. And so I suppose that is a form of recycling. It is certainly something that many of the lodges down on the Sand River are working at, because in order to deliver a 5-star experience and to charge the prices that they do, and they do need to charge those prices in order to maintain this area, you can't really say to somebody, well, you know, you can only have a bath once while you're here, because people will go somewhere else. And so they're expecting a kind of, I guess, Hilton-esque hospitality experience in the context of the bush. And so many of them are working on solutions of recycling water, but water usage out here in the tourism areas certainly is something that is definitely worth consideration and that people do a lot of work on. Now, Stefan, I want to show you my picture. Would you like to see my picture?
I would like to see your picture.
And then Legendre will show you all my picture, everyone. There it is. Oh wait, no, that's off genre. We don't want that one. There, that's artistic.
It is.
I'm so artistic.
I think you got the composition just right there. The colours are fantastic, rich, saturated.
Thank you very much.
We're trying to teach Genre how to give positive reinforcement for.
What do you think, Genre? Best photo ever. Is that what you said?
Wildlife photographer of the year.
Wildlife photographer of the year. That, of course, is a slight insult because he's calling us all wildlife, but thank you, Genre, that's not a bad compliment from you. And Jenny, you want to know about renewable energy in the Sabi Sands. We use a little bit of renewable energy, don't we?
I think it's getting there. I know of 2 projects, one of a reserve just slightly to our south that has taken their entire staff village onto renewable energy, solar panels, and as far as I understand, a good portion of their room's electricity is generated by solar and stored on batteries. And I know that the owner of this particular reserve on an adjacent farm that he has is working on to a zero electricity usage from the grid model by next year or the year after, where the electricity that he uses to farm with will be completely offset by the electricity generated by solar panels on his farm. And he gave me a very interesting statistic the other day. He said that if 800 farmers did what he did, they wouldn't have had to build the Medupi power station.
How's that? That's incredible.
And it's free land. It's on land that was reclaimed farmland, so it would take the next 30-40 years or whatever to get back to a natural state, and he just decided to put up some solar panels there.
I think that's fascinating. Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of, we've got solar panels here running the Gari repeater, for example. That's why when it goes cloudy, sometimes the Gari repeater needs a little bit of a boost, kick in the pants, which Eugene gives it every so often. Tony, a nice question from you. How do we get the local people involved in conservation? I think it comes down to almost one simple word, and that's awareness. It's not education so much as awareness. As people need to understand and need to derive some kind of benefit from this. They need to be brought into discussing how they could be deriving benefits from the rural areas. And I mean, look, I've painted possibly a slightly negative picture of that articulation between local people and wildlife. But, you know, let's take the Sabi Sands. There are probably 2,000 jobs within the Sabi Sands. That's local people. Each of those people is supporting between 6 and 8 people, sometimes up to 10. And so if you look at it like that, the Sabi Sands is supporting 15,000 people. But there are obviously a lot more. And there is a 60% unemployment rate in many of the villages out here. And so the conversation will continue. And I do think that there has to be a lot more dialogue, and I do think that there has to be a lot more kind of awareness, especially in the younger kids. They need to grow up with the knowledge. You know, a lot of those kids out there think that there are tigers in this reserve. They've never seen an elephant or a lion or a buffalo. And certainly there are efforts afoot to change that. But I think those could certainly be stepped up a bit. So, Tony, that's a very nice question there.
I once heard a nice statement that said conservation is a first world luxury. And it absolutely is. Even in South Africa, where the difference between haves and have-nots is so big, we grew up as haves, and we have this notion of conservation and this need and this want and this love and appreciation for conservation, but the have-nots don't. They see conservation areas as competition for resources, for grazing. They see it as a threat. Animals escape the reserves and eat their livelihood and, you know, threaten their lives and